Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 months now, mapping new star systems and looking for signs of life. It was quiet work, the kind that made some crew members restless, but Jake enjoyed these peaceful moments between the excitement of new discoveries. The USS Horizon was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was well built and had a good crew. 800 men and women called it home, and Jake trusted every one of them with his life. They had been together for 2 years now, exploring the far edges of known space and sending reports back to Earth Command. Lieutenant Lisa Park sat at the communications station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she monitored radio signals from nearby systems. She was young but skilled, with an ear for picking up even the faintest transmissions. Today she looked more focused than usual, her brow furrowed as she adjusted the signal filters. "Captain," Lisa called out, her voice carrying a note of concern. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors. It's not coming from any human ship." Jake walked over to her station and leaned down to look at the display. The screen showed waves of energy that pulsed in regular patterns, like a heartbeat made of light. "How far away is it coming from?" "About 6 light years, sir, but the signal is very strong. Whatever is sending, it must be using a lot of power." Lisa adjusted the controls again, and the signal became clearer. "Captain, I think this might be a distress call." Chief Science Officer Ryan Bell looked up from his workstation. He was a tall man with graying hair who had spent most of his life studying alien technology. "Let me take a look at that signal. Lisa, maybe I can figure out what kind of being sent it." Ryan moved to his own console and began running the signal through the ship's computer systems. The USS Horizon carried some of the most advanced translation software ever built, designed to help humans communicate with any alien species they might encounter. After several minutes of work, Ryan's face went pale. "Captain, you need to see this," Ryan said, his voice tight with worry. "The computer has translated part of the message. It's from something called the Zelkarian Empire." Jake had heard that name before in reports from other exploration ships. The Zelkarians were supposed to be one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, with technology far beyond what humans had achieved. If they were sending a distress call, something very bad was happening. "Put it on the main screen." Jake ordered. The viewing screen flickered and changed to show waves of translated text scrolling past. The message was broken and hard to read, but the meaning was clear enough. The Zelkarians were under attack by an enemy they called the Vorthek Collective. The attackers had already destroyed 12 star systems and were moving toward the Zelkarian homeworld with a fleet of nearly 100,000 ships. 100,000, whispered Navigation Officer Amy Chun from her station. "That's more ships than Earth has ever built." Ryan continued to work on the translation, pulling more information from the signal. The Vortheks seemed to be some kind of machine intelligence. They consume entire planets to build more ships and weapons. The Zelkarians have been fighting them for months, but they're losing badly. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. An enemy that could threaten the Zelkarians was a threat to every living being in the galaxy, including humanity. But the USS Horizon was just one ship, far from home, and without any way to call for help quickly enough to matter. "How long would it take us to get there?" Jake asked Amy. Amy checked her navigation computer. "At maximum speed, about 4 days, sir. But Captain, we're just one ship. What could we possibly do against 100,000 enemy vessels?" The bridge fell silent as everyone considered the situation. 800 humans against an army of machines that had already defeated one of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. It seemed hopeless, but Jake could see the determination in his crew's eyes. They had joined the exploration service to help humanity reach out to the stars, not to run away when other beings needed help. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez spoke up from his station. "Captain, if these Vorthic things are as bad as the message says, they won't stop with the Zelkarians. They'll keep moving through the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. Eventually, they'll reach human space." Jake nodded. Danny was right. This was not just about helping aliens in trouble. This was about stopping a threat that could destroy humanity itself. But the odds were still impossible. One ship against 100,000 was not a battle. It was suicide. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "there's more to the message. The Zelkarians are asking for help from anyone who receives this signal. They're sharing their tactical data and ship designs, hoping someone might find a way to stop the Vorthic." Ryan pulled up the tactical information on his screen. "Their ships are incredibly advanced, but they're being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The Vorthic fight in perfect coordination, like a single mind controlling thousands of bodies." Jake walked back to his captain's chair and sat down heavily. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like a physical force. Military protocol said he should report back to Earth Command and wait for orders. But by the time a human fleet could be assembled and sent to help, the Zelkarians would be extinct, and the Vorthic would be that much stronger. "Captain," Amy said softly, "what are your orders?" Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. These were good people, brave people who had followed him across the galaxy to explore the unknown. Now he was asking them to fly into what looked like certain death. But he also knew that if they did nothing, the death would come to them eventually anyway. "Set course for the Zelkarian homeworld," Jake said finally. "Maximum speed." The bridge erupted in activity as the crew prepared for the journey. Jake watched the stars begin to shift on the viewing screen as the USS Horizon changed course toward the battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The USS Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kelros system, and Jake Morrison immediately knew they had arrived too late. The space around the Zelkarian homeworld was filled with the wreckage of destroyed ships. Thousands of metal pieces drifted in the darkness, glowing with the heat of recent explosions. "My God," whispered Lisa Park from her communication station. "There must have been hundreds of ships here." Jake stared at the main viewing screen, trying to count the enemy vessels that surrounded the planet. The Vorthic fleet stretched out. Like a dark cloud, their ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns that hurt to look at for too long. Each ship was identical to the others, black and angular, with no windows or markings that showed individual personality. "How many are there?" Jake asked Amy Chun at the navigation station. Amy worked quickly at her computer, trying to get an accurate count. "I'm reading over 90,000 ships, sir. They're arranged in groups of exactly 1,000 spread out in a sphere around the planet." "And how many Zelkarian ships are left?" "I count maybe 200, sir. They're clustered close to the planet's surface, trying to protect the orbital stations." Jake felt his heart sink. The battle was already almost over. The Zelkarians had fought bravely, but they were vastly outnumbered and running out of time. Even as he watched, several Zelkarian ships exploded under the concentrated fire of Vorthic weapons. "Sir," Lisa said urgently, "I'm receiving a transmission from the Zelkarian fleet. They're asking us to identify ourselves." "Put them through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and changed to show the bridge of an alien warship. The being who appeared was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to hold great sadness. When he spoke, the ship's computer translated his words into English. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Zexhai of the Zelkarian Defense Fleet. You have entered a war zone. I advise you to retreat immediately before you are destroyed." Jake stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. "Admiral, This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship USS Horizon. We received your distress call and came to help." The alien's expression changed to one of confusion. "Help? You are one ship against nearly 100,000 enemies. What help could you possibly provide? We'd like to try, Admiral." "Can you give us a full tactical briefing on the enemy?" Admiral Zexhai was quiet for a long moment, studying Jake's face on his own screen. "Captain Morrison, your species is unknown to me, but I admire your courage. However, this battle is hopeless. The Vorthic have superior numbers and their coordination is perfect. They have already consumed 12 star systems, and soon they will add ours to their collection." "Tell us about their tactics," Jake insisted. "How do they fight?" The alien sighed, a sound that carried clearly through the translation system. "They move in perfect formation, never breaking ranks. Their ships are connected by some kind of mental link that allows them to act as one mind. When they attack, they do so with mathematical precision. There is no waste, no confusion, no individual decision-making." Ryan Bell had been listening carefully to the conversation. "Admiral, may we have access to your tactical data? We'd like to analyze their attack patterns." "If you wish, though I doubt it will help. I will transmit our records now." The USS Horizons. Computers began receiving massive amounts of data about the Vorthic fleet. Ryan and his science team worked quickly to process the information, looking for any weakness they could exploit. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez was studying the enemy ships themselves. "Captain, these Vorthic vessels are interesting. They're all exactly the same, built for maximum efficiency. But that means they probably all have the same strengths and weaknesses." Jake nodded. "What about their formation patterns?" Amy Chun had been analyzing the enemy fleet arrangement. "Sir, they maintain perfect geometric spacing at all times. Every ship is exactly the same distance from its neighbors. It's like they're afraid of disorder." "That's because they are machines," Ryan said, looking up from his data analysis. "According to the Zelkarian records, the Vorthic are artificial intelligences that have taken over robotic bodies. They think like computers, which means they value efficiency and predictability above all else." Jake began to see the first glimmer of a plan. "What happens to computer systems when they encounter something completely unpredictable?" "They try to analyze it and find patterns," Ryan replied. "But if there are no patterns to find, they can become confused or even lock up temporarily." Danny Rodriguez grinned. "And while they're trying to figure out what we're doing, we can hit them where it hurts." Jake turned back to the screen where Admiral Zexhai was waiting. "Admiral, we have a proposal. We want to attack the Vorthic fleet." The alien's eyes widened. "Captain, that would be suicide. Your single ship would be destroyed in seconds." "Maybe," Jake said. "But we humans have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight. It's the size of the fight in the dog. We don't fight like machines. We fight like humans." "I do not understand your meaning." Jake smiled grimly. "You will, Admiral. We're going to show the Vorthic something they've never seen before. Pure human chaos. When we attack, we want you to be ready to support us. Watch what we do, and when you see an opening, hit them hard." Admiral Zexhai looked uncertain. "Captain Morrison, I have lost thousands of good soldiers today. I cannot ask them to die for a plan that seems impossible." "You're not asking them to die, Admiral. You're asking them to live. And to do that, we need to think like humans instead of like machines." The alien was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Captain. We will follow your lead. But please, be careful. The galaxy has lost enough good beings today." Jake turned to his crew. "All right, everyone. We came here to help, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Lisa, open a channel to the entire ship. I want everyone to hear this." Lisa worked at her controls, and soon Jake's voice was being broadcast throughout the USS Horizon. "This is the captain. We're about to enter combat against an enemy that outnumbers us more than 100 to 1. They're machines, which means they think like machines. But we're humans, and we're going to fight like humans. That means we're going to be unpredictable, aggressive, and absolutely refusing to give up. Every one of you signed up to explore the unknown, and this is the most unknown situation we've ever faced. But I know this crew, and I know that we're going to show these machines what it means to fight against humans who have something to protect." Throughout the ship, 800 men and women prepared for battle. In the engine room, Danny Rodriguez and his team began modifying their weapon systems. In the medical bay, Dr. Tom Harris prepared for casualties. At every station, human beings got ready to do what they did best: adapt, improvise, and never give up. "Captain," Amy said. "Course laid in for the center of the enemy formation. Take us in," Jake ordered. "And Amy, I want you to fly this ship like you've never flown before. No straight lines, no predictable patterns. Make it dance." The USS Horizon began to move toward the Vorthic fleet, one small ship against an army of machines. But Jake Morrison and his crew were about to teach the galaxy an important lesson. Sometimes, being human is the greatest weapon of all. The USS Horizon dove straight into the heart of the Vorthic fleet like a shark charging into a school of fish. Amy Chun had the ship spinning and rolling in ways that would have made a fighter pilot dizzy, but the crew held on tight as their small vessel danced between the massive enemy ships. Incoming fire from all directions, called out Weapons Officer Kate Brooks from her station. "They're trying to target us, but our movement pattern is confusing their targeting computers." Jake watched the main screen as energy beams shot past them, some missing by mere meters. The Vorthic ships were turning to track the USS Horizon, but their perfect formation was starting to break down as they tried to follow the wildly moving human vessel. "That's it," Jake said with satisfaction. "They've never seen anything like this before. Keep it up, Amy. Don't let them predict where we're going next." Amy grinned as she threw the ship into another impossible turn. "Sir, I'm flying this thing. Like my old racing hoverbike back on Earth. These machines don't know what to make of it." The Vorthic had expected the human ship to approach in a straight line, following standard military doctrine. Instead, the USS Horizon was weaving through, their formation like a drunk person trying to walk a straight line. The machine intelligence controlling the enemy fleet was clearly struggling to understand what the humans were doing. "Captain," Ryan Bell called out from his science station, "I'm detecting massive communication traffic between the Vorthic ships. They're trying to calculate our flight path, but every time they think they've figured it out, we change direction." "Good," Jake replied. "Danny, how are those weapon modifications coming along?" Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez's voice came through. "The communication system from the engine room. Almost ready, sir. We've turned our mining charges into guided missiles, and I've rigged the cargo bay doors to launch them like torpedoes. It's not pretty, but it should pack a punch." The USS Horizon suddenly shuddered as a Vorthic energy beam grazed their shields. Kate Brooks immediately returned fire with their regular weapons, but the enemy ship's armor was too strong for their standard armaments to do much damage. "Captain," Kate said, "our regular weapons aren't having much effect. These ships are built tough." "Then we'll have to get creative," Jake replied. "Danny, are those mining charges ready?" "Ready when you are, sir." Jake studied the enemy formation. On his screen, the Vorthic ships were still trying to maintain their perfect geometric patterns while dealing with the chaotic movements of the human vessel. "I see a command ship in the center of that formation. It's bigger than the others and seems to be coordinating their movements. Kate, can you target it with our improvised weapons?" Kate worked quickly at her station. I've got a lock, sir. But we'll have to get much closer to ensure accuracy. Amy, take us right at that command ship. Maximum speed. Amy's fingers flew over her controls, and the USS Horizon accelerated toward the center of the Vorthic formation. Enemy ships moved to block their path, but the human vessel was too fast and too unpredictable. It slipped through gaps in the formation that the machines didn't even know existed. Firing mining charges, Kate announced. The improvised weapons shot out from the USS Horizon like angry wasps. The Vorthic command ship tried to destroy them with defensive fire, but the charges were too small and moving too fast. 3 of them struck the enemy vessel's hull and exploded with tremendous force. The command ship's shields flickered and went down. More importantly, the communication signals between the Vorthic ships suddenly became confused and contradictory. The perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous began to break down. Direct hit on their command systems, Ryan reported excitedly. The other ships are losing their connection to the central intelligence. Jake could see the effect immediately. Several Vorthic ships began firing on each other, their targeting systems confused about which vessel was the enemy. Others stopped moving entirely, as if waiting for orders that would never come. Now we've got them, Jake said. Danny, do we have more of those mining charges? Plenty more, sir. And I've got another idea. What if we ram one of their ships? The bridge fell silent for a moment. Ramming was considered a last resort in space combat, something you only did when you were about to die anyway. But Danny was suggesting it as a tactic. The USS Horizon is built tough, Danny continued, and these Vorthic ships are designed for long-range combat. I bet their hulls aren't built to withstand a direct collision. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. They all nodded back at him, ready to try anything that might help them win this impossible battle. All right, Danny, pick us a target. Amy. Chun had been listening to the conversation, and she was already changing course toward a large Vorthic ship that was struggling to re-establish communication with the command vessel. I've got the perfect target, sir. That ship is isolated from the others. The USS Horizon turned sharply and accelerated toward the enemy vessel. The Vorthic ship detected the approach and began firing frantically, but Amy was ready for them. She rolled the human ship at the last second, presenting the strongest part of their hull to the enemy. The collision was tremendous. The USS Horizon's reinforced front section smashed into the Vorthic ship like a hammer hitting an egg. The enemy vessel's hull cracked and split, and atmosphere began venting into space. The machine intelligence controlling the ship shut down immediately, and the vessel went dark. Hull damage on sections 2 and 3, reported Tom Harris from the medical bay, where he was also monitoring ship systems. But the structural integrity is holding. We're still in the fight. Jake felt a surge of pride in his ship and crew. They had just proven that human engineering and human courage could defeat superior technology. But the battle was far from over. Kate, keep targeting their command and communication ships. If we can isolate more of them from the central intelligence, they'll be easier to handle. Already on it, sir. I'm detecting at least 6 more command vessels in the formation. The USS Horizon began weaving through the Vorthic fleet again, but now the enemy formation was starting to collapse. Ships that had lost contact with the central intelligence were either shutting down or firing randomly. The perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous was becoming a weakness as confused orders spread through their communication network. Captain, Lisa Park called out, I'm receiving a transmission from Admiral Zex High. The Zelkarian fleet is ready to attack. Jake smiled grimly. Tell the Admiral to hit them now while they're confused. Target the ships that are still maintaining formation. On the main screen, Jake could see the Zelkarian ships moving away from the planet and toward the disrupted Vorthic fleet. The alien Vessels were more cautious than the humans, but they were taking advantage of the chaos that the USS Horizon had created. "Sir," Ryan said, "I'm reading massive system failures throughout the Vorthic fleet. It looks like their central intelligence is trying to regain control, but the damage we've done to their communication network is preventing it." "Then let's make sure it stays that way," Jake replied. "Amy, take us to the next command ship. It's time to show these machines what happens when they pick a fight with humans." The USS Horizon dove back into the enemy formation, its crew working with the kind of desperate efficiency that only humans could achieve. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and flying a ship that was never designed for this kind of combat. But they were human, and that made all the difference as they approached their next target. Jake felt a moment of clarity. This was what humanity was meant to do: stand up to impossible odds and refuse to give up. The Vorthic had made one critical error in their calculations. They had assumed that all intelligent beings thought like machines. But humans were different. Humans had something that no machine could understand or replicate: the ability to do the impossible when it mattered most. The battle around Kelros Prime had been raging for 2 hours, and the USS Horizon was beginning to show the strain. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the ship's hull was scarred from multiple enemy hits. But Jake Morrison and his crew were far from finished. "Danny, how are our engines holding up?" Jake called out. "We're running at about 70% power, sir," came the reply from the engine room. "But we can keep this up for a while longer. The mining charges are working better than I expected. We've taken out 15 command ships so far." Jake nodded with satisfaction. The Vorthic fleet was no longer the perfectly coordinated machine it had been when they arrived. Large sections of the enemy formation were dark and lifeless. Their ships shut down after losing contact with the central intelligence. Other groups were firing randomly, sometimes hitting their own vessels in the confusion. "Captain," Lisa Park reported, "Admiral Zexhai is requesting another conference." "Put him through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered, and the familiar face of the Zelkarian admiral appeared. But this time, instead of sadness, his large eyes held something that looked like hope. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Zexhai said, "your tactics are remarkable. We have been fighting this enemy for months, and in 2 hours you have accomplished what we could not do in all that time." "How is this possible?" Jake smiled tiredly. "Admiral, we're fighting them like humans instead of like machines. But now, I need your help to finish this. Can your ships adapt to our tactics?" The alien admiral looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, stop fighting like you're supposed to fight and start fighting like you want to win. Your ships are more advanced than ours, but you're using them in predictable ways. The Vorthic can counter predictable tactics, but they can't handle chaos." Admiral Zexhai was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe I understand. You want us to abandon our military doctrine and fight without order." "Not without order," Jake corrected, "with human order. Watch what we do and copy it, but make it your own. Use your imagination." The conversation was interrupted by Kate Brooks, calling out from her weapons station. "Captain, we've got a problem. The Vorthic are trying to re-establish their command network. 3 of their super command ships are moving toward the center of the formation." Jake looked at the tactical display and saw what Kate meant. 3 massive Vorthic vessels, each twice the size of a normal command ship, were pushing through the chaos toward a central position. If they managed to link up, they could restore control over the entire fleet. "We can't let that happen," Jake said. "Amy, take us toward those super command ships. We need to stop them before they can reconnect." "Sir," Amy replied, "those ships are heavily defended. We'll have to fight through at least 50 smaller vessels to reach them." "Then that's what we'll do. Danny, Do we have any more of those mining charges? About 20 left, sir, but I've got something better. I've been working on a new weapon using our cargo transporters. If we can get close enough to one of those big ships, I can transport a mining charge directly into their hull. Jake's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. But we'll need to get within transporter range, and that means getting very close. I can do it, Amy said confidently. Just give me a clear run at one of those ships. The USS Horizon began moving toward the center of the Vorthik formation, but this time they weren't alone. Admiral Zex-High had taken Jake's advice to heart. The Zelkarian ships were now attacking in small groups, using irregular patterns that confused the enemy targeting systems. Look at that, Ryan Bell said admiringly. The Zelkarians are learning fast. They're using their advanced shields to ram smaller Vorthik ships, just like we did. Jake watched as a Zelkarian cruiser smashed through a group of enemy vessels, its shields flaring with energy. The alien ship was moving with a kind of wild aggressiveness that the Vorthik clearly didn't know how to handle. Captain, Lisa reported, Admiral Zex-High is broadcasting our tactical data to other worlds in the region. Ships from 3 different species are changing course to join the battle. Good, Jake said. The more ships we have fighting like humans, the better our chances. The USS Horizon was now deep in the enemy formation, weaving between disabled Vorthik ships toward the 3 Super Command vessels. The path was dangerous, with enemy fire coming from all directions. But Amy Chun was flying with a skill that seemed almost supernatural. There, Kate called out. I can see the first Super Command ship. It's trying to link up with the others. Jake could see streams of communication signals flowing between the 3 massive vessels. If they succeeded in reconnecting, the Vorthik fleet would regain its deadly coordination. Danny, are you ready with that transporter weapon? Ready, sir. Just get me within 2,000 meters of that ship. Amy pushed the USS Horizon to its limits, dodging enemy fire while closing the distance to the Super Command vessel. The ship shuddered as several energy beams struck their shields, but they kept moving forward. 1,000 meters and closing. Amy reported 800 meters, 600 meters. Danny, now. Jake shouted. From the engine room came Danny Rodriguez's voice. Mining charge transported directly into their reactor core. You might want to get us out of here fast. Amy was already turning the ship away when the Super Command vessel exploded. The blast was enormous, sending shockwaves through space that rocked even the USS Horizon. The explosion also took out several smaller Vorthik ships that had been too close to the massive vessel. 1 down, 2 to go, Jake said grimly. But the destruction of the first Super Command ship had an unexpected effect. The remaining Vorthik vessels began moving erratically, as if they were receiving conflicting orders from the 2 surviving command ships. Captain, Ryan said excitedly, I think the command ships are fighting each other for control of the fleet. They're sending out contradictory signals. Jake realized this was their chance. All ships, concentrate fire on the remaining Super Command vessels. If we can destroy them both, the entire fleet will be paralyzed. The USS Horizon raced toward the second Super Command ship, but they weren't alone. Zelkarian vessels and ships from other species were converging on the same target. The aliens had learned from the human example and were now fighting with the same desperate creativity that had made the USS Horizon so effective. Captain, Security Chief Ben Walsh reported from his station, I'm reading massive structural damage throughout the Vorthik fleet. It looks like the confusion in their command structure is causing system failures in the individual ships. Jake watched as enemy vessels began shutting down all around them. The machine intelligence that controlled the Vorthik couldn't handle the chaos that human tactics had introduced to the battle. Without their perfect coordination, the machines were just collections of metal and circuits. Sir, Kate Brooks called out, The second Super Command ship is powering up some kind of massive weapon. It's targeting the planet. Jake felt his blood run cold. If the Vorthik couldn't win the battle, they were going to destroy the world they had come to conquer. All ships, emergency speed to that command vessel. We have to stop them before they can fire. The USS Horizon and its alien allies raced toward the second Super Command ship, but they were still several minutes away. A massive weapon on the enemy vessel was charging up, building to what would surely be a planet-killing blast. "Danny," Jake called out, "do we have any more transporter weapons?" "Just one, sir. But we'll have to get even closer this time. That ship's shields are stronger than the first one." "Then we'll get closer," Jake said. "Amy, take us right down their throat if you have to." Amy Chun nodded grimly and pushed the USS Horizon into the most dangerous flight pattern yet. The ship dove straight toward the Super Command vessel, passing so close to its hull that the enemy's defensive weapons couldn't target them properly. "Now, Danny," Jake shouted. The mining charge materialized inside the Super Command ship's weapon system just as it was about to fire. The explosion tore through the massive vessel, destroying both the weapon and the ship itself. The blast lit up space like a small sun, and when it faded, the second Super Command ship was gone. "Two down," Jake said. "One to go." But as they turned toward the final Super Command vessel, they saw that it was already under attack by a combined fleet of all human, Zelkarian, and other alien ships. The enemy vessel was fighting desperately, but it was overwhelmed by the sheer number of attackers using chaotic human tactics. "Captain," Admiral Zexhai's voice came through the communication system. "We have learned much from your example. The final command ship is ours." Jake watched as the last Super Command vessel was destroyed by concentrated fire from dozens of ships. With its destruction, the remaining Vorthik fleet began shutting down completely. The machine intelligence that had controlled nearly 100,000 ships was gone, leaving only empty hulls drifting in space. "We did it," Jake said quietly. "We actually did it." The bridge of the USS Horizon erupted in cheers, but Jake felt only a quiet satisfaction. They had proven that human courage and creativity could overcome any odds. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about the power of fighting like humans instead of machines. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kelros Prime, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the largest conference room on the Zelkarian homeworld. Representatives from dozens of different species had gathered to understand how one human ship had defeated an enemy that had conquered 12 star systems. Admiral Zexhai stood at the front of the room, addressing the assembled delegates. "The battle recordings speak for themselves," he said, gesturing to the holographic displays showing the USS Horizon's attack on the Vorthik fleet. "But what they cannot show is the thinking behind these tactics. Captain Morrison, would you explain to our colleagues how your species approaches warfare?" Jake stood up, feeling uncomfortable with all the attention. "We don't really have a special approach to fighting," he began. "We just do what seems right." At the time, when we saw that the Vorthik were using perfect coordination, we decided to be as uncoordinated as possible. When they expected us to follow military doctrine, we threw the doctrine away and made up our own rules. A delegate from the Kithrin Republic raised a tentative hand. "But Captain Morrison, how can an army function without proper coordination? How do you maintain discipline without following established procedures?" Jake thought about the question for a moment. "I think you're confusing coordination with cooperation. The USS Horizon's crew worked together perfectly, but we didn't follow a rigid plan. Each person did their job while adapting to whatever situation came up. That's not chaos, that's flexibility." Another delegate, this one from the Mantaran Empire, spoke up. "Your tactics seem to depend on individual creativity and quick decision-making." But what happens when those individuals make mistakes? Jake smiled. They fix them. That's what humans do. We make mistakes, we learn from them, and we keep going. The Vorthik couldn't do that because they were machines. Once their programming was disrupted, they couldn't adapt. But humans adapt constantly. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez, who had been invited to speak about the technical aspects of the battle, stood up next. If I may add something, Captain, the real advantage we had wasn't in our weapons or our ship design. It was in our willingness to break things and put them back together in new ways. When our regular weapons didn't work, we turned mining equipment into missiles. When ramming seemed impossible, we did it anyway. The Vorthik built everything to be perfect and unchangeable. We built everything to be fixable and improvable. Admiral Zexhai nodded thoughtfully. This explains much about what we observed. Your ship suffered significant damage during the battle, yet it continued to function. Our own vessels, when damaged, often become completely disabled. That's because we design things to be repaired by people who might not have the right tools. Or the right parts, Danny explained. Human engineering assumes that something will go wrong, and someone will need to fix it with whatever they have available. It's not as elegant as your technology, but it's more resilient. A new voice spoke, up from the back of the room. Captain Morrison, I am General Vortex of the Andromedan Defense Corps. My government is interested in establishing military cooperation with your species. Could human advisors help train our forces in these new tactics? Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces, watching him expectantly. I think there might be a misunderstanding here. We're not trying to create a new military doctrine or training program. What we did at Kelrose Prime wasn't about following a specific set of tactics. It was about thinking like humans. But how? Do we teach our soldiers to think like humans? Asked the Kitharin delegate. You don't, Jake replied. You teach them to think like themselves, but without fear of breaking the rules when the rules don't work. Every species has its own strengths. Humans are good at adapting and improvising, but I'm sure your people have abilities that we don't have. The key is to use those abilities creatively, instead of just following a manual. Dr. Ryan Bell, who had been analyzing Vorthik technology since the battle, stood to address the group. I've been studying the enemy ships we captured, and I think I understand why our approach was so effective. The Vorthik intelligence was incredibly advanced, but it was designed to solve problems by finding optimal solutions. When we presented it with a problem that had no optimal solution, it couldn't cope. What do you mean? Asked Admiral Zexhai. I mean that humans don't always look for the best possible solution to a problem. Sometimes we look for a solution that's just good enough, or even a solution that shouldn't work, but does anyway. The Vorthik couldn't understand that approach because it was inefficient. But inefficiency can be a weapon when your enemy expects you to be logical. Jake nodded in agreement. That's exactly right. The Vorthik expected us to fight in the most effective way possible. Instead, we fought in the most human way possible. Sometimes those are the same thing, but sometimes they're completely different. The conference continued for several more hours, with delegates asking detailed questions about human psychology, engineering practices, and military philosophy. Jake found himself explaining things that he had never really thought about before. Aspects of human nature that seemed obvious to him, but were revolutionary to other species. When the formal session ended, Admiral Zexhai approached Jake privately. Captain Morrison, I want to thank you again for what you and your crew accomplished. But I also want to ask you something personal. Why did you decide to help us? Your ship could have returned to Earth and reported the threat to your own government. Why risk your lives for beings you had never met? Jake considered the question carefully. Admiral, I think that's another human trait that you might want to understand. We have a hard time ignoring people who need help, even when helping them. puts us in danger. It's not always logical, but it's who we are. Your species is remarkable, Admiral Zexhai said quietly. We have much to learn from you. And we have much to learn from you, Jake replied. That's why I'm recommending to Earth Command that we establish permanent diplomatic relations with the Zelkarian Empire and all the other species here today. The galaxy is a big place, and there are probably other threats out there that we'll need to face together. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of a very different ship. The USS Horizon had been repaired and upgraded with technology provided by their new alien allies, but it was no longer alone. A joint human-alien task force now patrolled the outer edges of known space, hunting down the remaining Vorthix cells and protecting vulnerable worlds from similar threats. Captain Lisa Park called out from her communication station. We're receiving a distress call from the Rigel system. It looks like another machine intelligence, but smaller than the Vorthik fleet we faced. Jake smiled grimly. How many ships are they reporting? About 5,000, sir. 5,000, Jake mused. That's almost manageable. Set course for Rigel. And Lisa, send a message to Admiral Zexhai and the other task force commanders. Tell them we've got another teaching opportunity. As the USS Horizon and its allied ships changed course toward the new threat, Jake reflected on how much had changed since that day when they first intercepted the Zelkarian distress call. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but it was no longer a place where advanced civilizations had to face extinction alone. The lesson of the USS Horizon had spread throughout known space. When beings worked together and thought creatively, there was no enemy too large, no odds too overwhelming. The machine intelligences that had once seemed invincible now faced opponents who fought with imagination, courage, and the most powerful weapon in the universe. The refusal to give up. Jake looked out at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, other species were learning to fight like humans. And somewhere else, other threats were about to discover why the galaxy now knew a simple truth. When you see one human ship coming toward your fleet of 100,000, you better run. The USS Horizon and its crew had started something that could never be stopped. The spread of human thinking throughout the galaxy. And that, Jake realized, might be humanity's greatest gift to the universe. Not their technology or their weapons, but their unwillingness to accept that anything was impossible when lives were at stake. The stars ahead held new challenges and new opportunities. But whatever came next, the galaxy would face it with human courage, human creativity, and human determination. And that made all the difference.